Foundation regarding reducing youth access to electronic nicotine delivery systems and tobacco. Good morning. Name and address for the record, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Leslie Spurlock, and I'm here in Vero Beach. Today I'm here to talk to you about reducing young adult and youth access to not only tobacco but also vape products. As a tobacco prevention specialist, I really truly believe that vape products are tobacco, but that's not how the product is merchandised, and it's not how the state has viewed it either. We're concerned that vape retailers who do not sell tobacco are not subject to monitoring under Florida statute. Here you can see the tobacco chapter. I've just pulled a few highlights out of these two chapters in our state statutes. Now, the one on the left is the tobacco, number 569. It has a similarity to under miscellaneous crimes, which is where electronic cigarettes or nicotine products are defined. So miscellaneous crimes and tobacco are very separate statutes in the law. However, the similarity is that there's no self-merchandising for either one of the nicotine products or for tobacco, and the minimum age to purchase is 18, as defined by both of these statutes. However, if you look at the third bullet under miscellaneous crimes, the definition of a nicotine product does not include a tobacco product as defined by Chapter 569. So it further separates vape products from tobacco products, how they're handled and how they're enforced and how they're monitored by law enforcement. And we're extremely concerned about monitoring for youth underage sales and access to e-cigarettes, because if you follow the news at all, our youth are not using regular tobacco and traditional tobacco anymore. They're using these vape products. Juul is one of the most popular of those, and 25% of our high school kids are using Juuls and other vape products. Now, e-cigarettes such as Juul and vape pens are now the most popular product among youth. Here's just a few of the other products that deliver nicotine. Juul is on the top, and then you have the Swarin Drop, which is refillable, and the My Blue, which are disposable, and one is refillable. So Juul's share of the market being over 72%. And we also know that 16 times more likely to be a 15 to 17-year-old using Juul than a 25 to 34-year-old. So here's just a packet of our Juul with the pods on the side. You can see the flavors. They're designated by those colors. And these are some of the other similar products to Juul. This is where I was saying that our Florida high school use trends have gone up. If you follow the dark blue line on the left from 1998, it goes all the way down to 2018 to about 2.5% of our high school youth are actually using smoking, using traditional tobacco products. However, they just started to survey the kids about vaping in 2011, and you can see how it's shot up all the way to 25%. If you look across that line, you can see that back in 1999, kids were smoking at a rate of 25%. Now they're vaping at a rate of 25%, and it's very concerning. We also have an issue with our middle school students. They're not quite as high, but they are rising. I'd like to also point out that Juul claims they're for adults, but this is a typical ad for a Juul product. They're pulling these ads now because the FDA is coming down pretty hard on them. But the CDC has also said that it's really flavors that make them more attractive to kids. 96% of the youth use Juul flavors, 96%. You can see, you may not be able to read it, but fruit medley and mango, cool mint, creme brulee, classic menthol, and cucumber are the most popular. Tobacco flavor, of course, is less popular. Only 4% of the youth using flavored Juuls use that tobacco. There was also another question asked, which is, was marijuana ever used with Juul? And among all the users that they polled, 30% said yes. This is just an example of how the products are being marketed to kids. Looks like Cool Whip, looks like, vanilla candy, Candy King, cookies. And that's one of the reasons that the kids are so attracted to the vape products, because those are e-juices that are for the refillable modules. Now, before the state acted, our rising concerns about vaping really led to local action by Vero Beach, Sebastian, and you here at the County Commission on restricting the age of sale and purchase, and for the self-service or behind-the-counter merchandising of tobacco and for the vape products. So why is the retail so important? Why is it so important to monitor? Well, because when they did this poll by the Truth Initiative, 74% of the kids obtained Juul pods at a physical retail location. Another 52% got them from a social source. And I was really surprised by this. I thought that certainly they'd be getting them from the internet because it's so anonymous, but it's not according to the poll that they'd taken. So would you be surprised if I said that retailers also do not really control access very well? This was taken at one of our local pharmacies. And if you can see where it says rechargeable right there, those are blue cigarettes right under it. That's right. And if you go down further, 2 more times, then you can see those are Swisher Sweets and Black and Mild cigars, cigarellos. And clearly, you can walk up to that and actually touch those products and take them off the shelf if you want to. And really, our merchandising, our restriction on merchandising and making sure that's behind the counter really isn't working in this case. So, is there a solution? Well, we know that the federal, state, and local laws are on the books. But as you could see from my first slide, the vape stores, if they do not sell tobacco, are not open for search and inspection by any law enforcement officers. Because when a tobacco retailer actually obtains his tobacco retail license from the state at an annual rate of $50 a year, he also is signing to the openness of his premises. They're open for search and inspection and monitoring by alcohol, beverage, and tobacco, by the FDA, and by local law enforcement. But in the statute that covers vape products, there is no such permit. So what I'm suggesting that the commissioners think about is maintaining a list through local licensing. A local license is capable of keeping a list of both tobacco and vape shops, enforcing all the federal, state, and local laws, funding a compliance program. In the long run, it might reduce the density of retailers. It could be something that the commission, this body, would consider doing, is reducing or restricting the flavors to anyone over 21. You might even raise the whole age of purchase to over 21. You could ban drug paraphernalia, reducing youth initiation, perhaps, of tobacco and e-cigarette use, and reducing successful underage youth purchases of tobacco and e-cigarettes. In January of this year, Alachua County did enact an ordinance that did something very similar to a tobacco retail license. They decided that they wanted to include e-cigarettes and all tobacco products and make 21 the age of purchase for all those products. They They want all retailers to obtain a distribution license. It's also annually renewable, and for every location. They want to prohibit new retailers from selling tobacco near a school, and sometimes parks are included in those ordinances too. And then cities do have the option to opt out of that retail licensing. So this was all in compliance with Pam Bondi when she was there. They ran it by her, and she did approve their ordinance. And that ordinance is going to be taking place in October 1st, I believe. So I really want to thank you for letting me bring this to your attention, and would like to know if there were any questions that I can answer.
Questions for Ms. Spurlock? There being none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And we'll now move to 14E1, Commissioner Zork.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. After a recent visit with Ms. Spurlock and some of the folks of her organization, it was brought to my attention and finally realized why there are so many standalone vape shops that are not selling tobacco when it gets into the regulation side and the policing side of what these groups can do, or these vendors. To me, I kind of treat nicotine as, if you get it through a cigarette or you get it through vaping, to me, nicotine is somewhat of I put them all, kind of all on the same playing field. And what I'd like to see, if there's consensus today, is to have the county attorney look and see what other options there are out there. I know we don't have the resources to be in the policing business, but there's nobody at all watching the vape shops. If you have time one day, you don't have to drive very far. There's usually somebody standing on a street corner spinning a sign, enticing you to come into their shop. I took the occasion to walk into one, and everything is where at a store selling nicotine products or tobacco products, there's a counter, and traditionally they're behind the counter. But if you walk into some of these, as soon as you walk in the door, at the table adjacent to the door is a Juul product or a vape product of some type, because there's nobody at all checking on any of the activities that go on in these stores. I don't even know how many of them have not pulled a local license to see are all these locations actually have even an occupational license to sell from a retail perspective. So this first initial step would be is have the county attorney look to what other areas in the state have done, and bring that as a potential draft ordinance for consideration to where we can provide some kind of some essential enforcement rules. I don't know how the enforcement mechanism would be. Ideally, I'd like it, if you're going to sell Juul, you have to have a local ordinance would require them to get the tobacco license, so it brings in that state enforcement element, where they're the experts at coming in and monitoring the tobacco sale operations. I don't know if that's achievable or not, but that would let the state's enforcement arm and compliance arm take care of that portion. But that would be if the county attorney could find some mechanism to do that. I'd be happy to answer questions. If I'm able to answer them, I might have to ask Ms. Spurlock to assist on some of the answers.
May I comment on that cost of enforcement? That's what the local license fee would be for. It would be commensurate with the budget that you would put together to do enforcement here. Whether it would be for you to contract out to local law enforcement to do that for their overtime or for whatever that needs to be, or, you know, it would just cover what your enforcement would be. So that's one of the reasons to have the license, and the license fee would cover the program cost.
Ms. Spurlock, I doubt that could be the case, absolutely. So have you seen what the cost of a license is for these in any of the communities?
They have not set that yet for Alachua, so no,
Okay, so
I have
to
not.
say that it would cover, I think is really a guess. My guess is that it's going to take multiple visits to a Juul shop, and that the license would have to be $1,000, $2,000, or $3,000. Seriously, if it was actually going to cover the cost. So again, it's difficult to say that, you know, a $25 or a $50 or $100 licensing fee is going to cover costs like that. It won't.
Well, we don't know what the license fee would be.
But it won't. I
You
mean,
would
it just-
build the budget, and then you would figure out what the license fee would be.
Well, I'd like to, okay,
Or,
We'll disagree there, probably a number of other places. It wouldn't cover the budget.
right, and I think that would be a challenging part, or if you made the fee high enough and said, or you could get the state $50 tobacco licensing fee and push them in that direction, but I think we have to,
The direction, I think, is actually to go to the state.
right, that would
The
be
state-
ideal.
Well, I think that's where we should go for a number of reasons.
Right.
First, the idea that we're going to pay for the enforcement I think is ridiculous. But the state is the regulator of tobacco. On the federal level, the FDA. And we, as local governments, too often try to bypass the state because the state isn't doing exactly what we want. I think you had mentioned in your backup the idea of having this as one of the priorities for the next legislative session. If that's where the board wants to go, fine. But to think that we're going to address this issue also, I think is going down the wrong path. I think that if we try to address this is just inviting a reaction by the state, which will further try to undermine our home rule. So again, I believe the right path is for us to try to get the state to do the job they recently said. And I'll remind the board that, just a few moments ago, a wise man said, asked, where do we draw the line in using the coercive arm of the state to shape behavior? And I believe this is one of those places. We have a big on education, we should use education if we want to, but this is a state issue. And I'll remind the board that if you look at our organizational chart, we have 50 different boxes on it. Each different box is another line of business. The more we add to things that local government's supposed to be responsible for, the worse we do on everything else. So again, we simply cannot address every type of wrong that comes before us. And if we don't have the strength to limit it to actually core local government functions, like building roads, like the sewer and water, like law enforcement, I think we're going to end up failing. So as much as I appreciate Ms. Spurlock's efforts, which I do, I certainly don't believe this is appropriate for local government, unless you want to go down the path of actually trying to get the state to do what the state wants. So that's.
Well, I'd ideally like to see how we could get the state to do their side, and maybe through Dylan doing some investigation and seeing what other mechanisms are out there. I think purely this is a state enforcement side. They're the experts at it. They have a very good program for doing it. I don't know the mechanism to get us there. I know last year there was a number of vape bills that, because it's so lucrative, they had some of the best talent in the lobbying side to push those efforts back. Hopefully they'll come up again next year and we can look at potentially adding that to our legislative initiatives, which we have a number of them, so you have to decide, do we have to take something off to add something on? But initially, just to have the county attorney look and see what's out there. Is there a mechanism where we can get back under the state enforcement side with minimal effort would be, I think, at least worth exploring.
Well, Mr. Chairman, and I could support that, but I again, having been involved with the stings, or as we call them, enforcement visits over the years, it has to be done broad scale throughout the county. It's a very costly endeavor, and it's tens of thousands of dollars by the day as it's happening, plus the incarcerations and notices to appear and then the court costs, and there is quite a substantial amount of enforcement cost involved. With that, I don't believe that a local licensing fee or permitting fee would be able to ever support such an endeavor. So I would support this if we were exploring the opportunities with council to see what avenues were out there, but what avenues would be necessary to lobby the state and have the state involved, because I don't believe that we could support this program for very long and be very effective.
Commissioner Adams.
Yep, I would be happy to support doing a little bit more homework and finding
Yes.
out what the parameters are, what our options are, who's responsible for what. I think it's a little confusing right now. I agree that there's an issue that we need to kind of understand a little bit more as it affects our community. I'm not sure, right now, me personally, I'm not sure if this should be a local thing or a state thing. I mean, as I am licensed by the state. I have a state inspector that comes into the restaurant on a regular basis. But I also know, you know, there's one that covers, at least for restaurants, you know, a certain area, and there's not enough of those. So I understand the concerns on both sides. I'm fully supportive of gathering a little bit more information so we can have a better understanding and a better discussion. So if that's where you want to go with it, at least
That
as a
would be-
first step, I would be happy to second that motion, if that's the one that you're making.
That would be fine. Just have the county attorney do some additional review and checking around and doing some searches to see, is there a way to get us back under the state side with minimal county effort? And if there's a way to achieve that.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I've got a little different take on the whole home rule thing is, if I'm a state legislature and I'm sitting here in the local government say, all we should do is build roads and water and sewer, then I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm going to regulate vacation rentals then, because you don't want to do it. You just want to do roads and sewer. And I think that's a very quick way to where we get preempted out of everything. So I take a different look that if the state can't step up and do the right thing, then it falls to local government to do these things. Secondly, as far as, you know, we in my memory, we've done something similar to this twice now. Once was with the pill mills, where we passed an ordinance requiring a local county license, and part of that requirement was the head doctor had to be a member of one of 2 or 3 very prestigious boards, and that none of the quack doctors could meet that requirement, and we almost immediately shut down the pill mills, and I think that was only like a $50 county license fee, so it wasn't that expensive. And then the second one was with the vacation rentals, where again we required a local county license, and in that case, I think we were, where we were at like 300 for the first year application, and that covered 3 years or something like that, and the initial inspection and setup and things like that. And that seemed to work, that we got all of the vacation rentals in compliance. So I'm supportive of going forward, at least getting more information, having Dylan look around and see what else is out there. I'm also, since the state already regulates tobacco, I'm not terribly opposed to try to get the state to wrap e-cigarettes in with that, since they already preempt tobacco. But you know, again, if they're going to get out lobbied and outspent and not be able to move on that, then again, I think it falls to local government to have to take action. So, but if the motion is to just have staff come back with more information and things like that, I can fully support that.
Okay, just to make a couple comments on what you just said, Commissioner O'Brien. The short-term rentals is a local issue. It's called zoning. So we're just doing one of those main functions that we've always done, so nothing new there. And the pill mills actually was a crisis which rose to a certain level where I actually would support what you just said before of where do we draw the line? We draw the line on the regulation side because of the urgency there. Things I don't see in the present case. So I just wanted to distinguish those two.
Well, I noticed in Leslie's presentation that line of the kids using e-cigarettes was skyrocketing, and given the negative health impacts of nicotine, I could argue that this is getting close to a crisis situation.
Okay, that's about where we draw the line, because there's not an immediacy with this that there is with the pill mills, I believe. I mean, there are many of us here today that, before cigarettes got to be bad, actually smoked in their youth, and then chose themselves to stop. Yes, I'll admit, I actually smoked in my youth. I actually drank in my youth. All these things that youth
Now
did.
things are clear.
Oh, yes.
Now we've explained everything here.
Not an election year.
But again, so,
Now, when you smoked, did you inhale, Mr. Chairman?
you know, I don't mind saying I did, because that was the least of the things I did back then.
Now we've taken a turn, we don't want to go down, so.
Well, hell, if he wants to challenge me on this one, I'll just ask him to match me one for one.
I'm so scared right now.
But the meeting's taking a
What
turn.
was your motion?
The meeting's taking a turn.
Don't
So
fear
we
you.
have, We have a motion from Commissioner Zork, seconded by Commissioner Adams. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Motion passes 4-1. Commissioner Solari dissenting. Thank you.
If I may
and we will-
clarify, so I'll be bringing back an agenda item that'll be basically talking about the licensing structure in,
Actually, his words were a way to get the state to do its job. That's what Commissioner Zork said.
Right, if there's a mechanism to get vaping sales back under the tobacco-type nicotine sale regulation, that's where we would like it to end back up, and if there's a mechanism.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Thanks.
so I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. So, and that's, the vote's already been taken, 4-1, Commissioner Solari dissenting. We now move on to the other public discussion item, which was moved up, and that would be to give Mr. Myers an opportunity to make a comment, because on the health and medical pharmacy bill, because he has another commitment he's got to get to, and he missed this afternoon's discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner Solari. You are my favorite District 5 commissioner.
Thank you.
You only did.
So far.
Oh, he's the only one.
There was a clarifier in that.
District 5, you're. I just want to take a little time to speak with you about the item that's going to be on the agenda later this afternoon. I understand the cavalry is coming at 1 o'clock, but I'm not going to be here. So I wanted to take time to express my concerns about the disproportionate shifting of the contributions of the health insurance premiums to the employee on the current plan, which is called the Gold Plan, and also talk with you about the proposal to implement a Silver Plan and what I think the unintended consequences of that would be. So I'll start with that. My opinion is that if you create an additional plan with higher deductibles and higher percentage of employee copays, that all of your employees that are with no health problems, that are very healthy, so to speak, will go to that plan. And all of your employees that are battling with some health problems and know what their costs are on a monthly basis because they regularly use the plan will stay on the current Gold Plan. And what I fear is that next year or the year after is that you'll want to eliminate your Gold Plan because the costs are going to rise at a higher rate than they're going to rise on the Silver Plan, because the healthy employees will be on the Silver Plan. So the bad news is we had a little bit of a bump in the road with the experience rate with some higher claims in the last year, which obviously is causing staff to be proactive and try to do some things that they believe are going to salvage the healthcare plan and make it survive long into the future, and that's what I would hope would happen also. The good news is that in the last 2 years, the plan has experienced a surplus in the reserves just in the health insurance fund. So at the end of fiscal year 2016-2017, the year-end balance was $10.6 million in the health insurance reserves. 2 years later, at the end of fiscal year 2017-2018, the reserves were 13.2. So you've experienced almost a $2.5 million increase just in the reserves in the health insurance fund. My hope is, before you make a final determination this afternoon, if you do, is that consideration will be given to the increase that has taken place within the reserves, and that at some point you would decide that you need to set a floor and a ceiling on what the reserves are. And I believe you're required to keep about $5.3 million in the reserves for the health insurance fund, which would be approximately 3 months worth of run out in case you ever decided to go from being a self-insured fund to being a fully insured fund to pay out the run out claims. You have more than twice the amount that's required. And so I think as a policy matter, I think you need to set a floor and a ceiling, and I would suggest that you set a floor of about $7 million and a ceiling of $10 million on your plan. Never let it go below 7 and never let it go above 10, and try to stay within that happy median. And when and if there's projections that are going to take it below 7 or above 10, that you use, if it's above 10, you use those proceeds to help lower the premiums of both the county taxpayer and of the employee. And if it's going below the 7 million, that you do the opposite, which would be to obviously increase those premiums, but never to let it go below the floor of 7 million. So I know I'm not going to be here for the final discussion. I appreciate Commissioner O'Brien putting me on the agenda, allowing me to, at least give my thoughts. So as you're making your final deliberations today, you'll take my comments and, include them into the conversation before you make a final decision. And I thank you for your time today.
Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Steve.
We now move to 10C1, public notice items. Mr. Reingold.
Mr. Chairman, did you want to have the death train update at this point in
I'm
public?
just going to have him read the public
Okay, and then-
notice,
okay.
and then we'll go to the death train.
Thank you very much. We have one public notice item. This will be a public hearing that'll be scheduled for July 2nd, 2019. This will be consideration of a request by Garrett Goudros to amend the Land Development Regulation, Section 932.07, piers, docks, and boat slips by revising a 400 square foot footprint restriction on unwalled boat shelters to be consistent with Florida Department of Environmental Protection and other jurisdictional agency requirements. Again, this will be a public hearing that is scheduled for July 2nd, 2019. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reingold. So now we'll move to 12F1. Wait. Okay, come on up. On the death trains.
Come up like an undertaker.
I thought we were going to have.
Erica, Public Works Director. Before I get started, I'd like to introduce the board to the County Traffic Engineer, Janie Hollingsworth.
That's right, I thought you were going to give the presentation.
Oh, I will be. But first I want to introduce Janie. Janie comes to us, she's been with us for about 5 months now. She's got 19 plus years experience in traffic engineering with 10 years highway and rail grade crossings, preemption. She is very versed in the workings of the trains, high-speed rail, and freight trains. She's also a current member of the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, MUTCD, on the National Committee. She's done numerous inspections of rail crossing, ag-grade rail crossings in her career, and she's prepared 500 plus preemption calculations, which when we get into this, you'll see just how important that is to Brightline trying to come into the county. So with that, Jeannie. All right, moving on. On May 1st and 2nd, the county met with DOT staff and we visited all 32 crossings. We took field trips for a couple of days and we went and looked at them. Myself, Janie, and the Assistant Public Works Director, James Ennis. So I'm going to do that after, but thank you. So what we did is we reached out to DOT just prior to the meeting and for the most recent construction plans. DOT's responded with a set of construction plans that were approved for construction on February 13, 2019. The county had no knowledge that these plans existed. Our last contact with AAF, Brightline, Virgin Trains, was back in October of 2018. DOT, or Brightline, did reach out to us to set up a meeting to discuss construction in the county, but that meeting has been pushed off to July. Other than that, we have not heard from Brightline or anybody regarding our comments from our comment review letters for the construction plans from 2016 letter and the October 2018 letter. The meetings went well. DOT acknowledged that there's problems with the construction plans, inconsistencies, lack of detail for pedestrians, and really no detail for preemption. And they are going to be providing us with their comments regarding the site visits. We've been in discussion with them over the last month or so, and we know they're working on it, but it's a very sensitive subject with DOT. On June 4th, the county provided Jared O'Rourke, the Freight Logistics and Passenger Operations Administrator for DOT, with a letter regarding our overall observations of the crossings and our review of the plans. And we provided, in that letter, we provided over 162 comments regarding what we consider major safety concerns for each of the crossings. On June 5th, we had a roundtable meeting with the Secretary of DOT, Kevin Tebow, and District 4 Secretary Jerry O'Reilly, and several other members of the Florida Department of Transportation. At this meeting were representatives from Indian River County, Commissioner Solari and Jason Brown were there, along with county administrator, managers, and council members from Martin and St. Lucie County. There was also staff members from MPO and several other local governments. And the meeting with DOT was to try to create a stronger partnership between DOT and the local communities to enhance infrastructure improvements and focus on environmental issues that we face today. During the meeting, the AAF came up and we discussed, Indian River County staff talked about the letter that we had sent to Mr. O'Rourke. At the meeting, when we were briefly discussing that, Secretary O'Reilly said that the AAF was moving forward and permitting was complete. At that time, Indian River County staff, Martin County, St. Lucie County staff, we all basically chimed in and said, we haven't issued a permit. None of us have issued a permit to Brightline, Virgin Range for any of the crossings that they're doing in our traffic boxes, any kind of the roadway crossings, pedestrians, and so on. Not only that, none of the counties even have received right-of-way applications for this type of work. Additionally, both St. Lucie County and Martin County don't have the most current construction plans as part of AAF's construction schedule. So overall, the meeting was positive. It was a good meeting, I think. Secretary, I do need to mention Secretary Howes, who sits on the Florida Transportation Commission. He did offer to reach out to the engineers, and as being an engineer himself, to try to give us a engineer-to-engineer conference with the people who are designing the crossings and the rails. I did hear back from Secretary Howes, and he did not have a contact for the Segment 8 rail construction plans, which are the north-south ones through Indian River County, but he's still looking and trying to get somebody to contact us. As of this date, I have not heard back from him again. Lastly, we also heard last week after the agenda was written that the city of Vero has been talking to the constructors and Brightline with regards to some of their crossings. They brought us into the loop because we are the maintenance entity of their signals, and they're looking to try to partner with Brightline or Virgin Trains to replace the signal at 26th Street. So with that, I'll move to a quick PowerPoint presentation. I gotta be like Vinny, I gotta have PowerPoint. So this is a quick status of regarding the signals. So we did our field review using the February 2013 plans, or 2019 plans. Basically, we identified concerns, consistencies with the plans, and provided the June 4th letter, as I alluded to earlier. Based on the field reviews, we sent the letter to Mr. O'Rourke on June 4th, and these were basically the highlights of the letter. The previous plans and comments weren't addressed, design plan conflicts, traffic mitigation, railroad preemption, second train logic, we'll get into in a minute, left turning cues, variable speeds, pedestrian safety, roadway grade and grade transitions, highway rail crossing services, construction, road closures, and enforcement and education. So what does all this mean? So this is basically an overview that we believe needs resolution. All right, so we looked at the Sebastian Boulevard, County Road 512 westbound. And you can see that, basically we have a lot of issues at this. One of the main issues is pedestrian crossings. We don't really see in the design plans where they took pedestrian safety seriously, in our opinion. We need some signs added, gates, ADA requirements. Janie's expertise is in this area, and she brings to us that where there's out west and other areas that they take pedestrians seriously. If you get caught in here, there's a way out. You're not stopped by the gate. It can be a harrowing experience if you're too close to the train. So these are the types of sidewalk extensions. We have sidewalks that end at the railroads, and they haven't addressed most of these issues in their construction plans. Along with pedestrian safety, we have gates. There's ways to, allow people to escape if they get caught during a train coming, because remember now we've got, if this ever comes, we have Brightline moving at 110 miles an hour. Not only do we have our freight trains, but now we may have this coming in. So there's second train warning. We don't know what the parameters are going to be, how quick the freight trains will come through or the second Brightline train will come through at that speed. So there's visual signs for us to be able to protect the pedestrians and motor vehiclists. So this is a good one. This happened on May 2nd, right after we concluded our meeting with DOT. This is on 26th Street, right down here. This car carrier got stuck on the crossing. He had to unload his vehicles in order to get his truck off of the crossing. So right now it's just a freight train coming through. What if this had been Brightline? Would there be ample warning? We don't know, because at this point in time, construction plans don't really say. So traffic congestion and mitigation. One of the issues that we have is with increased trains, timing is you have to clear traffic. We've all been stuck in train traffic before. We get stuck and it's a long ways and we're waiting and we're counting the rail cars and so on and so forth, to get across. So with these, there's ways to mitigate traffic, ways to make sure that, we can move traffic along. And it takes the railroad design engineers and the people who control the signals, which are us, to get together and minimize this and look at each one of these to ensure that we minimize the impacts to traffic and we don't mess with emergency response times. So here's some pictures. So what we did is we went and we looked at some of the intersections, and you can see the one in the top left that's Aviation and US 1. 20th Street and Commerce is on the top right. Odlow and US 1, and then 4th and US 1. Railway, they basically back up, and we've all sat in these before. However, oops, what did I do? There we go. All right, so next thing we did is we looked at Odlow. Odlow's a very highly traveled roadway. So when we have train coming through, all the traffic stop. As you can see, this is a mock-up of how we see the traffic that's all backing up on the roadways. All right? So you get traffic congestion during the train, it blocks right through, and then everything backs up everywhere. Well, once this train goes through, we have to clear this. We have to be able to, the traffic signal has to run to be able to clear all this traffic. So how do you do that when you got another train that may be coming? We don't actually know the schedules yet, but it's a possibility that we need to be able to address. So just looking at the freight trains that have come through, we've observed traffic congestion. and we have when an additional track is there, well, what are we gonna do with the queuing of the traffic? This is something that we need to get addressed prior to anything going on with Brightline and Virgin trains at our intersections. So a couple of weeks, for the last couple of weeks, we've had signal failure. Basically, the gates got stuck down at Aviation Boulevard and US 1. And I had a couple of 3-4 calls about this. Okay, so what happens is it gets stuck for so long, it backs up past our access point on Aviation Boulevard. So traffic starts cutting through the complex right here in front of between buildings A and B, around the traffic circle, and off they go. So these are things that we need to address. One of the things we did find out was that the number on the signal that you call wasn't really the number, so we're working on having that fixed. It was a fiasco. So how do we fix this stuff? Well, railroad preemption is one of the best ways, is the ways to do this. The purpose of the preemption is to clear the vehicles that may be stopped on the track prior to a train and prohibits movement towards the track during the train event. It should be noted that that the county will be maintaining over 19 signals that will need the preemption for railroad cross warnings. So here's some examples. As you can see from the picture, you've got people after the train comes through and we're trying to clear, you got people stopped on the tracks. Well, let's add another track and let's add another train coming. Again, we don't know what the schedule is at this time. We know it's 16 trains a day or something like that. But we don't know how they're coming through, what the timing is compared to freight trains. So worst case scenario, we have this condition. We're still trying to clear the traffic from one of the trains. And now we have a second train event. And we've got people stuck on the railroad crossing with no place to go. Not going to end well. Again, Highlands Drive, same issue. Yeah. Additional design elements that we face in the county, as we're all aware, there's several roadways where the roadway is right next to the railroad track. Intersection of Old Dixie Highway and some of our cross streets, east-west streets, cause problems. 45th Street. There's room for 1 or 2 cars, and then you got to wait. 65th Street, which is a growing area, same thing. We've got to figure out a way to deal with this. Left turn movements, this is on Schumann Drive. This is an interesting one. Because there's neighborhoods so close, if somebody's trying to turn left when we got a gate down, well, we could have a problem. Same thing here. This is up on Roseland. This is where the post office is. You know, we have a lot of traffic on Roseland, and I've been in this situation up there when I was up in that area where a car was basically trying to turn into the post office, and there was no way for traffic to get around it, and it was backing up toward the railroad tracks. So education enforcement, another way to get across, don't stop on the tracks, think about the tracks. And we just try to get the public to understand that, hey, if these trains come, you need to be aware of your surroundings. With that, Janie will answer any questions you have.
I've got one question for you. Based on your interaction with FDOT, including the meeting with the Secretary Tebow, do you have that feeling now that they're fully engaged in the safety aspects of this project?
From the meeting itself, I didn't get that from the meeting, to be quite honest with you. They were going to look into it, but we haven't heard anything from FDOT since the meeting other than Mr. House. I haven't heard from Mr. O'Rourke. I haven't heard from Secretary O'Reilly or Secretary Tebow on the information that we provided them. I don't know if they've reached out to Jason or anybody.
And I'll note that when you think about the difference in speed, because so far now, the death train has notched a remarkably interesting record down south, where the speeds go up to 79 miles an hour. But looking at the crossings that you just showed, coupled with the idea that speeds may be up to 110 miles an hour, certainly tells me a story that it's only going to get worse, which I think is very problematic. And I'll note that evidently Rusty Roberts was in town recently at a Republican club and mentioned, when it came up to deaths, he said simply, there will be railroad deaths. So I find it remarkable that he can just basically say that and continue to say that in such a way that it's acceptable to have railroad deaths. I mean, I know that FDOT, when you talk about car deaths, they want to get down to 0 incidents, but don't seem to have that same urgency at all with the train, which I find incredibly problematic. But the attitude of the death train for deaths seems to be almost like they realize they failed in achieving their ridership goals, they failed in achieving their revenue goals, so they're going to be successful at one thing, killing people, which I find to be somewhat perverse. So I want to thank you for your work, but remind you that your work is incredibly important at this time, and anything that you need further from the Board of County Commissioners, I think you have to let Jason know right away and approach us. We're all, I think, clear that we want to make sure that if it does come, at least is as safe as possible. And I don't think, well, your presentation shows we're not there yet, and I don't think we're there at all. Actually, I don't think we're going to get there until we change the attitudes of both the train and the Florida Department of Transportation.
Mr. Chairman, a
Commissioner
couple
Short.
questions. One, just a general comment. I think we have 2 competing death trains in Florida. I just did a quick death count of Sunrail. They're at 15. They've been open a little over 2 years, and their trains operate at incredibly slower speeds. Most of them are in the 45 and under speed limit range, but they have a growing fatality count, and there's actually a website, somebody that posts the number of days since the last crash. How many days have they operated without hitting something?
Well, they're competing for the same customers, and Tri-Rail gets a fare box revenue of 15%, and so it's failed on getting its revenue count, failed on getting revenues to cover the costs. So again, they can only succeed at one thing, and that's killing people. Right. And it's amazing that they're doing such a great job. And again, the Department of Transportation still seems to be, well, it seems to me, in my view, failing to intervene and actually, say, use best management practices that other states like Illinois and California have today and apply. So, I mean, really gets me, when Rusty Roberts talks about suicides, I find that to be offensive, but I grew up with the Long Island Railroad train. The Long Island Railroad train was old when I was young. But in 20 years in my community, I never once heard of a suicide on the tracks, even though it carried probably 10 times the number of customers for a number of years. Not one hearing of a suicide, but there's a suicide every month on the death train tracks. I find it amazing. So you're gonna have to keep me off this topic, Rich. I can barely control myself.
But I'll get on to my other question.
Yes.
So we have the list of all of our crossings where we had prepared probably 2 years ago. 45th Street, we know we want sidewalks. There's a turn lane project scheduled for there. Similar things for 8th Street, 4th Street, Oslo, Highlands. So hypothetically, and I think if it comes is more of the context, but then you have, if it does come, what do we need to prepare for budget-wise? If somehow they magically got their plans in order, actually started some construction, we actually had all these crossing improvements to make in a condensed time period. At some point where I can put a price tag on that, because we would have to be paying them, being Virgin Trains, whoever the entity is that we deal with, for those wider crossings or the sidewalk, areas where the sidewalk would go over the crossing. So at some point, we'd have to have a price tag for that to know what we need to have available to pay for those.
Yes, we would.
Right.
What I can tell you is that some of these crossings that have the sidewalks, they're required to make the connection.
Okay.
Some of the ones that we don't have, then yes,
Then we would be on the,
we would partner with them to make sure that we got it. We had reached out back in 2016 and in 2018 when we reached out to Allboard Florida and Brightline Virgin Trains. We provided them with our construction plans for 45th Street, 49th Street, 41st Street, and a couple other ones that we have, and said, hey, we want to partner with you. You know, we came to the board in, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years ago, time flies. You know, FEC wanted us to spend $750,000 to do 45th Street and 49th. And the decision was made by the board to wait until Virgin Trains comes through, or if they ever come through, because of the fact they were just gonna tear out what we were gonna do. But we have that cost. You know, we could break out the signal, the sidewalk stuff, and some of the pads and whatnot that they were gonna do. And we could probably, given a month or so, we could come up with a cost for a typical sidewalk crossing at a railway, and then we can apply it to wherever we need to. But we can work on that.
you'd have to just let us know when we need to make that provision. One interesting note in reading a news article from Sunrail where the caption is, spike in Sunrail deaths, FHP says they're 100% preventable, and then it shows where DOT is stepping in to provide, to install, and put in place basically sealed corridors by fencing. So they have the resources and abilities to fix other train problems to try to reduce deaths, but they have not seemed to have the same keen interest over here on this side of the coast. So thank you for the good work you're doing, and I think our new traffic engineer with her expertise in this area will become very helpful as we go on. Thank you.
One of the things I do want to mention is the sealed corridor. We did a basically drive-through, and there are numerous locations where you can see what we call the path, where they've worn a path across the railroad, where they cross mid-block coming out of the communities. Not addressed whatsoever that we saw in the plans. You know, these are where the fences come in. You know, trains at 110 miles an hour, it's here. You look, oh, there's a train, next thing you know, it's there. So there's got to be protection for the people who are trying to, you know, cross at a non-pedestrian area. You know, sealed corridors are the way to go to protect people in this area. And we have several of these, what I call the goat paths, where people come across and, you know, they're just trying to get to the store across the street. They don't want to go a block and a half to cross at that area. And we understand that. But with these trains coming through at these speeds, you know, we've got to help our community, you know, we've got to help protect them from the trains. And this is one of the things that we're trying to do.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you had asked earlier what we felt about DOT. I can tell you my thoughts. And Scott, if you could pull up the slide that had Oslo and US 1 with the vehicles parked on the tracks. You know, when we went to the field meetings, I went to a couple of the crossings with DOT staff, and what I saw from DOT staff was them realizing that our safety concerns were legitimate and real, and they seemed to agree with that. What was expressed that day was that they didn't have the authority to regulate this, and then I hear echoes of that when we met with Secretary Tebow, was that, well, we can use leverage to encourage Brightline to do more safety improvements, but it seems like they feel either it's not their role or they don't have the authority, and I think this is maybe somewhat contrary to what I saw in the Opaga study, that there need to be regulations and that DOT needs to step in. It seems like some folks at DOT see that there's a need to make sure there are safety improvements. I just don't know if they are feeling they have the authority or the place to do that. I would hope that if they don't think they have the authority, maybe they would be allies in trying to gain authority or regulation for higher speed rails, as that gap was pointed out. And you know, I really don't feel good about them just trying to encourage Brightline to do the right thing, because that doesn't seem to be the case. No, the picture with the dump trucks in the car on the stop, and yeah, so putting everything at the feet of Brightline or Virgin Trains to do the right thing is not very comforting, because they keep talking about, well, that's suicides. Clearly, I think a person parked on the tracks there with the traffic backed up is not intending to commit suicide. Maybe they've made a slight mistake in pulling onto the tracks, but I think the penalty for such a mistake should not be what it potentially could be. So we're continuing to work with DOT to hopefully get some results here, but I'm a little concerned about their belief in their ability to make Brightline do certain things. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else for Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. The update is very much appreciated, and good luck as you go forward.
Thank you.
We'll now move to 12A1, Aviation Boulevard Extension. Mr. Madsen, good morning. Are you going to let Mr. Bowling sit in with you one more time?
Good morning. Phil Mattson, Indian River County MPO. And I'll go quickly through the context slides on Aviation Boulevard and get into a project update. So the problem, for those in the audience who are not familiar with what we're trying to do, 37th Street is rapidly reaching capacity. It is our main access to the hospital. It is our sole access to the hospital. In fact, at our last meeting, we adopted a comprehensive plan amendment to raise the level of service to D+20. So we're actually exceeding level of service D, which we hate to do, in terms of the near-term prognostication for 37th Street traffic. Here's what happens. All the medical trips are funneled onto 37th Street from both north and south. There's 36th Street as an inbound option, but those cars have to exit also on 37th. And there's a lack of parallel roadways in that part of the county. There are obstructions such as the Main Relief Canal, lots of conservation land, particularly to the east, airport to the west, and just the development patterns. You know, we've got Vero Country Club and Country Club estates here, and other developments that are longstanding and really can't be disturbed. So there's a potential for tremendous future growth in the area. I know Cleveland Clinic is making improvements to the existing medical center. It's now renamed it Indian River Cleveland Clinic Hospital. We have 300 plus vacant acres that are in play all around this area. So the problem could theoretically get worse with respect to 37th. And were we to simply improve 37th Street, there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of driveways now connecting to 37th Street from both north and south, and they can't all be signalized due to spacing requirements. So if you're one of these cars here in this picture and you're looking to head east onto US 1, return home, you might have just received medical treatment. There's already a queue, and you already have to kind of run a gamut of traffic. But as a 5-lane facility, that gamut's going to get a lot worse. And add to it the fact that, you know, it's a very expensive project. There are a lot of utility lines underground and so forth that would have to be relocated. The disruption costs, we could probably maintain traffic through here, but the confusion aspects of it, you know, it's really hard to calculate what those costs would be to the public that's seeking medical attention. So this is what we're trying to do. Basically, the yellow, blue, and red alignments shown on this map, respectively, are to take the US 1 Aviation Boulevard intersection directly to the hospital, make some improvements to the existing blue section, which is the Huma Crystal Drive, 35th Lane Road right now, and then create a new road all the way up to 41st Street, in effect putting a new road on our grid, but this road's almost sole purpose would be access to the medical complex. So working north to south to show some of the challenges, and Public Works has been actively negotiating with a lot of these landholders, but the red alignment that we saw on that master map goes from 41st Street to 37th, and luckily a lot of this is under the control of what we call the Riverfront Groves and Harbor Bluffs development, and it will probably require, most of this alignment that you see here to build this new road will probably require a 3-party right-of-way agreement between Riverfront Groves, Harbor Bluffs, and the county that we are negotiating now. But since it's unbuilt on, and it's really a good opportunity, there's really no better time to do much of this alignment, just because we're not disturbing anything. The exception is to the south, where the old surgical care building fronts 37th Street directly, and The county got an appraisal value of $1.55 million for the surgical care building. Public Works staff made a preliminary offer to the owner for that price, and that offer is contingent on board action. So why we need that surgical building is to keep the alignment straight and not meander like it's shown in this picture here, and to keep as far away as possible from the rehabilitation center, which is that pentagon-shaped building you see in the lower right. So moving down to the actual 37th Street intersection with the new road and the blue alignment at Huma Crystal Drive, this is where the road will be straightened out to kind of keep it away from the rehabilitation center on property owned by the surgical center. There'd be a little interruption to the existing intersection of Huma Crystal Drive and 37th. That will be relocated a little bit to the west. And other than that, all that's needed for this blue piece are really a negotiated agreement for right-of-way with the hospital district, who has been cooperative throughout this process. And then at the very southern end of the blue alignment here, we've got two properties. One is the, I think it's called the Vero Beach Physicians Building. The other is the Grove Place Surgical Center. And it'll just need sort of a clip from either one of those properties, maybe a slight clip from both, to connect to the new roadway, which will be the yellow alignment. So we'll need a clip through the parking lots of those two buildings to connect blue to yellow. And then here's the yellow alignment, the southernmost segment, segment number 3. And the most problematic piece to date on this has been the, as it says in the staff report, the piece down here. So Public Works has been reaching out to RDC Phoenix, Inc., and they've gotten appraised values in the $110,000 and $170,000 range for some of the parcels that are needed. Parcels will have to go through, the alignment will have to go through some of these parcels. They've made offers substantially higher than the appraised value, yet the property owner seems to think there's commercial potential in this area and is asking for even more money on some of these parcels. So that part will have to be overcome. This part here, though, fortunately, is owned by Dr. William Mallon. He's met with staff. He seems very, very supportive of the concept. I think it'll open up some avenues for development, which are beneficial to a lot of the physicians in the area. It'll give us more emergency outlets if we need it from 37th Street in the event of some sort of catastrophic collision on 37th Street. Might block ambulance access, might make everybody's life difficult getting to and from the hospital. We've got a north and a southbound outlet, and I think a lot of the medical community sees this and sees the value of the concept. So this part is easier, relatively speaking. So the staff recommendation of the report is to authorize staff to proceed with procurement of design services and right-of-way acquisition. The design is necessary in order to make offers for right-of-way. And at this point, I think it's more appropriate if Stan or Rich has anything to add on terms of right-of-way acquisition or answer any questions that you might have on where we're at with it.
Any questions of Mr. Batson at this point?
Not, but for Rich when he comes up on
So
this.
at this point, we'll ask Mr. Spierker to come up. And Mr. Spierker, any other comments you'd like to make?
Not at this time, no.
Commissioner Zork?
Yes, on the, if you could go back one picture, Phil. Kind of in the bottom right-hand corner is the retention area that was created for the new kind of hospital physicians 3-story building that's to the right of the oval. It's outside of the picture. Have we had any discussions to see about the, I guess the hospital district is the property owner in this case, or is it under the other hospital entity?
I think this parcel's under a different ownership than Cleveland Clinic.
Okay. And I think there's one picture that shows where that retention area goes only about halfway across their southern property holdings, as us trying to improve the conditions and getting ingress and egress to the hospital area. You know, would they allow us to enlarge that retention area to address some of the retention needs for the project?
In real preliminary discussions, they were gonna develop that area, so I'm not sure that they want to do that.
Okay.
But we've broached the subject with them when we had some discussions with them. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, but they were more concerned about, or they had plans to develop that whole quadrant over there. Stan, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Secondarily, is there a better picture of the lots needed between US 1 and then before you get to the acreage for Dr. Mallon's piece? Kind of in there. Is there one that shows which pieces are needed? Okay, there we go.
Okay.
So when we cut through that, what happens to the street that's in the southern third of the yellow box? Does that become closed off? Does that become a stop sign on either side and the new road goes through, or does that get closed off and a circular turnaround put in, kind of creating a free flow through of the new Aviation Boulevard East, or whatever the road name's gonna be?
Okay. These parcels, the parcels are basically blocks. There's like 6 or 7, there's about 7 parcels in the north block, and the south block is basically everything in the middle between where aviation would connect and the street that goes east-west. The property owner is selling them in blocks, not in individual lots.
Okay.
Okay, so the appraisals that we've got, that we obtained are basically for the blocks, not individual lots.
Okay.
Okay, so you're talking, I think it was 13 lots in parcel 2, which is between the 2 streets that are shown, and parcel 1 was 100,000, and that was like the 7 or 8 lots along the northern boundary. So when you take those out, what we've been talking to the city is we'll extend the north-south roadway north and come in at a T intersection at that location. Okay, there'll be a cul-de-sac. We'll get rid of the east-west portion to the road to the west, the road to the east, because we'll essentially, if we move forward with this, we'll own those lots, so there's no reason for those to be there, and we'll approach the city to vacate the right-of-way.
Okay.
On the west side, what we'll do is we'll put a cul-de-sac in. There's really no reason for anybody to come that way. There's 2 businesses on the corner. The rest of the lots would be owned by the county that we could utilize for stormwater. They're part of the blocks that we're looking at for the need for property to do this. So in the long run, it's better for us to purchase the entire block as they're shown from the realtor to help us mitigate for the roadways that are there.
Okay, and last question, where aviation would actually cross US 1, I know you and I had a conversation sometime back about, is there a way to kind of shift the current crossing 30 or 40 feet to the north so you don't have to take the business on the southeast corner? I don't know if the alignment keeps that business owner intact, or are we taking part of him, or can we shift to the north a little bit?
We've been playing with the alignment to stay away from that
Okay.
corner parcel. We've got a preliminary one where we think we've got it taken care of. We're still messing with the
Okay,
west side of the intersection. But we're confident we can stay away from that corner lot.
okay,
To add to this, we've been in discussions with the Florida Department of Transportation. They're gonna be doing a study on a PD&E study on US 1, and part of that PD&E study was we want them to look at the possibility of putting an overpass, basically a flyover. That would take a little bit of, it'd take a lot off the intersection. It'd give us direct access without a stop condition or a train problem at that location. The downfall is how do we get traffic onto that roadway with an overpass?
right.
So we're still, again, playing with the layouts. We think there's a solution, but I need DOT to do their PD&E to be able to fully ascertain whether or not it's plausible.
Right, okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions of staff? Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak on this item? Anybody from the public? There being none, the staff recommendation is for the board to authorize the staff to proceed with procurement of design services and right-of-way acquisition activities for the Aviation Boulevard extension. Anybody care to make a motion?
Motion to move staff recommendation?
Second.
We have a motion for staff recommendation from Commissioner Zork, seconded by Commissioner Flesher. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. And with that, it's just about 12 o'clock, and we will take a break until 1 o'clock. So we'll resume the meeting at 1
And
o'clock.
then we're gonna have the health.
It's a time
plan.
certain for the health matter, which
Stan?
it's almost
Dang, I didn't say that.
the one scheduled to be up anyway, so.